love how Captain Pike's Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 3 portrait foreshadows his dark fate. Star Trek Strange New Worlds has long been praised for its careful balancing act between nostalgia and new storytelling. The series excels at highlighting iconic characters while giving them fresh depth. But few moments in Star Trek lore are as quietly chilling and brilliantly executed as the way Captain Christopher Pike's character arc has been foreshadowed in visual cues, particularly through the Season 3 portrait that hangs in the corridors of the Enterprise. This subtle storytelling technique demonstrates how the series manages to blend character psychology, tragic destiny, and visual metaphor without a single word of exposition. At first glance, the portrait might seem like a simple homage to Pike's heroic persona. He is depicted standing tall, uniform immaculate, posture confident, eyes forward. The lighting is dramatic but balanced. The background a muted starfield that evokes the vast unknown. Fans might initially interpret this as a conventional hero shot, Pike as the emblem of Starfleet's moral and physical courage. But there's something quietly unsettling beneath the surface, an almost imperceptible tension in the brushstrokes and composition that rewards viewers who look closely. One of the most striking elements of the portrait is the way Pike's eyes are painted. They are not merely directed outward toward the viewer. There's a subtle shadowing around the sockets, a depth that hints at an inner burden. For viewers familiar with Pike's canonical fate, these shadows are ominous. They evoke the knowledge that, despite his outward composure, Pike is destined to endure unimaginable suffering. In Star Trek's lore, we know that the events leading to Pike's catastrophic accident, his exposure to the Delta radiation on Talos IV, leave him severely disabled, confined to a life in a wheelchair with limited mobility and speech. The portrait, in this sense, becomes an exercise in visual foreshadowing. It presents a man whose heroism is inseparable from tragedy. The use of color in the portrait further underscores Pike's looming fate. While Starfleet uniforms are traditionally a bright, optimistic yellow for command, the artist has softened the hue here. It leans toward amber, almost sepia, giving the scene a nostalgic, slightly melancholic tone. The background stars are dimmer than expected, with faint streaks suggesting motion or disturbance. This subtle chromatic choice may appear inconsequential to casual viewers, but it mirrors Pike's narrative trajectory. A man who shines brightly in the universe yet is overshadowed by destiny's inevitable cruelty. In essence, the color palette whispers a warning that Pike's bright leadership is destined to be dimmed. Another intriguing aspect is the portrait's composition. Pike is centered, yes, but he is positioned in such a way that the viewer's eye is subtly led downward toward the lower edge of the frame. This compositional technique creates a visual tension. Pike's gaze seems to resist gravity, yet the viewer is reminded of it. It's almost as if the universe itself is subtly pressuring him, echoing the Star Trek narrative of fate versus free will. Pike's posture, while commanding, is slightly rigid, hinting at restraint, both physical and emotional. This restraint is not merely artistic. It symbolically prefigures the immobility he will face in later events. Season 3, in particular, teases the moments where Pike's leadership and optimism are tested against crises that threaten not only the crew, but also his personal well-being. And the portrait silently narrates this inner struggle. Perhaps the most genius element of this foreshadowing is the interplay of light and shadow in the artwork. A subtle, almost imperceptible shadow stretches from Pike's left side, trailing toward the frame's edge. It is neither menacing nor overtly sinister, but it exists, a visual cue that hints at darkness encroaching upon the character's life. Unlike overt Star Trek villains or dangers, this shadow is abstract, symbolic of the fate that will eventually confine Pike. For longtime fans, it is a chilling reminder. Starfleet's bravest heroes are not immune to tragedy. The portrait doesn't scream doom, but for those attuned to visual storytelling, it quietly whispers that Pike's journey will not remain unscathed. What makes this foreshadowing especially clever is its duality. On one hand, the portrait exudes traditional heroism. Pike's jaw is set, uniform pristine, insignia gleaming. On the other, every nuanced brushstroke, the shadowed eyes, the softened amber tones, the slight rigidity of posture, acts as a subtle harbinger of loss. It mirrors Pike's personality in the series itself. He is a man of boundless optimism, a commander who inspires loyalty and courage in his crew. Yet, the series has carefully built layers of vulnerability beneath his confident exterior. hinting that the very heroism that makes him admirable also exposes him to the universe's cruelest turns. Season 3 leans heavily into this duality, placing Pike in scenarios that challenge his optimism, testing whether he can maintain his moral compass while facing escalating threats. The portrait also functions narratively as a meta-commentary on Star Trek itself. Across the franchise, Starfleet captains often face moral dilemmas that reflect real-world leadership challenges. Pike's impending fate, foreshadowed in the portrait, becomes a broader meditation on the price of heroism. The visual storytelling invites fans to consider the paradox of courage. To be a true leader is to accept that suffering may come, often indiscriminately, to those we most admire. In this sense, the portrait does more than depict a character, it encapsulates a philosophy, one that resonates through Star Trek's moral and ethical framework. It's worth noting how the portrait's placement within Season 3 episodes enhances its narrative weight. Often shown in Enterprise corridors during quiet character moments, it serves as a subtle narrative anchor. Crew members pass by, sometimes glancing at it, as Pike engages in decision-making that increasingly tests his limits. For viewers, the portrait functions almost like a Greek chorus, silently commenting on the heroism and tragedy that underpin Pike's journey. Its presence is a reminder that in Star Trek, destiny is both unavoidable and intimately personal, a theme that resonates throughout Strange New Worlds as it navigates episodic adventures alongside serialized character arcs. The cleverness of the foreshadowing also lies in what the portrait doesn't do. It never depicts Pike injured, defeated, or despairing. There is no explicit visual cue of the accident that will ultimately define his later life. By withholding the obvious, the artwork encourages viewers to engage with the subtext, to consider Pike's psychological and emotional state rather than simply his physical fate. It's a sophisticated narrative move, characteristic of Strange New Worlds' approach to storytelling. The show trusts its audience to read between the lines, to appreciate the interplay between visual art and character development. Furthermore, the portrait establishes a dialogue between past, present, and future. It pays homage to the Pike scene in the original series while setting up the inevitable tragedy that informs his future appearances, including the famous episode, The Menagerie. This temporal layering, connecting Pike's heroic present with his tragic future, demonstrates Star Trek's genius in weaving continuity into visual storytelling. The portrait becomes more than a set piece. It's a narrative device, a subtle bridge between Pike's present optimism and his destined suffering, compelling the audience to reflect on the fragility of heroism itself. The Season 3 portrait also resonates thematically with Pike's relationships aboard the Enterprise. His loyalty to his crew, his deep empathy, and his ability to inspire confidence are underscored by the subtle tension in the portrait. Just as the shadow in the artwork